Have you ever wanted to completely remove bleed from your drum mics? Now you can. Hey guys, how's it going? Alex Scott here with Consordini.com. Thank you guys so much for checking out another one of our super cool studio gear reviews. Today we have a software review slash plugin review. This is Drumatom 2 from the guys at Accusonus. Now, this is a very, very interesting plugin slash piece of software because it functions as both. There's a Drumatom player version that runs within your DAW, and then the standalone software version, which is mainly what we're going to be taking a look at. But it really does one thing, and it does that one thing very, very well. This is a piece of software that is designed to remove the bleed from your drum mics. Now, if you're a mix engineer like me, you know that a lot of times, we get files from a client, we're working on a record, whatever. We pull up the drums and maybe they weren't recorded super well. Maybe the mics weren't placed great. Maybe a multi-pattern mic was set to Omni when it shouldn't necessarily have been, but we have a lot of bleed in some of our close mics, our snare mic, kick mic, tom mics, hi-hat, etc. Sometimes we want to have a little bit more control over these elements. Sometimes we might want to compress that signal very, very heavily, but we run into difficulties because there's a lot of bleed in the microphone. This is a really common problem, and Drumatom seeks to alleviate that. So what Drumatom does, you basically drag in a set of drum stems, which I've done here. I've dragged in a whole folder of stems that I pulled out of a track. So we have a hi-hat mic, we have kick kind of bust down, we have overhead left and right, we have a pair of room mics, we have the snare mics bust down into a little stereo file, and then our toms bust down into a stereo file. And Drumatom goes through, once you drag the tracks into this section here and hit Analyze Group, sort of groups them all together and intelligently analyzes them as a set and sort of compares points between the files and figures out which track sort of needs which signal, if that makes any sense. So it'll compare, say, the snare track and the kick track and say, okay, well, here's where all the kicks are happening based on frequency analysis. Here's where all the snare drums are happening. So we're going to work to lessen the bleed between all of these things together. And it does that with all of the mics as a group, analyzes them all together. Now, in terms of workflow, it's really, really well designed because from what I understand, you can actually drag in multiple tracks and analyze them separately as groups. And then once you've done the, albeit pretty simple processing that the program allows, you can then re-export them to waves. Now, if you are running the Drumatom player version, which is kind of the VST plugin that works within your DAW, you use it as a multi-instrument. So you can set each output to a multi-out in your DAW and mix them like normal if you want to do it that way. Using it as a standalone plugin, that's where it's the most interesting to me. I would kind of get a record or get a song from a client, I would take their drum stems and I would fly them into the software and then re-export them. So that's kind of why we're focusing on the software version here. So, like I said, I've got a track pulled up here, or drum stems from a track, and it's got it split down. You can then assign, make sure it does name things and sort of figure out what it is automatically, which is really handy, but just in case, it didn't name something correctly, you can go in here and sort of pick the instrument. That's going to help the algorithm determine how to best remove the bleed. Once you've got all that going on, it's very, very simple. We basically just have a focus knob and a fine-tune knob and volume control. And then we have this kind of suppression thing here, which is going to show you what exactly is going on in terms of like gain reduction, because really how it ultimately works, it's not just a gate, but it's a very advanced gate. Let's say that. So this suppression is going to show you where it's ducking the volume around your instrument. But one of the things that Accusonus says this is really amazing at is really intelligently figuring out, not just kind of amplitude-based stuff and saying, okay, well, the kick drum isn't triggering right now, so we're going to duck. That's not it. It does all kinds of cool kind of frequency-dependent analysis, and again, works between the mics to do as good of a job of removing the bleed as it can. So we have focus, which to me sounds like it really just helps to dial in exactly that, the focus on the individual element. And then we have fine tune, which seems to work more with the top end and how much bleed is really being allowed from other microphones. And you'll see that as we kind of work through things. Then we have a bypass knob here, and then again, volume per clip. And that's really ultimately it. So let's just go ahead. I just want to listen to the kick and the snare mic separately, kind of play around with these controls so you guys will see what it can do. So this is bypassed, essentially nothing going on. So you can hear the snare drum in there, you can hear room noise, you can hear all the cymbals, typical bleed that you would expect from a drum kit or a close kick drum microphone. So now let's let it run, and I'm just going to mess around with some of these controls here. So turning this focus knob all the way up, you hear it kind of removes a lot of the high frequencies, pretty much all the high frequencies, and really just focuses on the low end. And then as we kind of dial it around in the middle, you can tell it's doing a lot of stuff, but really it's just kind of tuning it to ear and for the effect that you want. The thing that impresses me the most is that it's completely removed the cymbals in a very clean way. And then with our fine-tune knob, you can hear it's just kind of fine-tuning, again, particularly those really high frequencies. So when we set that to max, it's actually allowing a lot of that high frequency information back in. It's not getting rid of 100% of everything, but mainly the cymbals is where it's really doing a lot of the work. And that's great from a mix engineer's perspective because, kick drum, the biggest problem is that if you start to compress your kick too heavily, it's going to bring out a lot of wash and really unpleasant kind of bandpass filtered cymbal sounds along with it, because that's where a lot of your undesirable bleed is coming from. Snare drum, typically not as big of an issue in a kick drum mic, at least from my perspective, because those are such intrinsic parts of the kick, you're going to want to compress both of them quite a bit, typically speaking, especially if you're working on rock or aggressive styles of music. But the fact that it's removed a lot of the cymbals is really, really great. It does sound really, really natural as well. And again, you can boost the volume if in case you need to on each individual file, kind of level things out that way. And then you do have an A and a B, so you can kind of set up two different approaches to it, one that's maybe a little more extreme, one less, and A-B between them, and a bypass switch, of course, both very handy features. So now jumping over to one of our snare drum tracks. You can hear a lot of the hi-hats, cymbals, kick drum. There are some ghost notes. So let's go ahead and start playing. So it's not doing a 100% perfect job, but it's removing a lot of the cymbal bleed. Again, primarily, that's like really kind of the biggest thing that's going on. And a lot of the low end bleed of the kick, those kind of low frequencies. But it's leaving the tone of the snare drum very much intact. It sounds a little processed to my ear, but other than that, it's definitely doing its job. So there it is with and without. And, you could definitely spend some time and sit here and really dial things in to sit exactly where you would want them to. But, hopefully this kind of gets the point across. It's definitely doing its job. So that's really all there is to Drumatom 2. We have some kind of basic stuff up here in terms of, importing options, analysis options, but there isn't really much under the hood that you go in and do. It's really just these two knobs here, focusing it on the timbre you want and then fine tuning it from there. Very easy to use, very fast, very, very intuitive. I might want to see a little bit more in terms of control. But again, this is a situation where you've got kind of an automated algorithm that's doing a ton. It's gating first and foremost, as you can hear, but it's all very kind of frequency dependent gating. And then it's also doing this really interesting process where it's comparing each file against the other files and really using that as a primary reference point to use like comb filtering and all kinds of very subtle things to help clean up your signal. Now, obviously, the main application for a piece of software like this is going to be for the working mix engineer, okay? Somebody who is getting files from a lot of different studios, somebody who's getting drum tracks from a lot of different bands and studios. And that's absolutely a lot of what I do in my day-to-day work is bands send me records to mix, sessions to mix, and I'm getting drum files that were recorded from all over the place. You know, sometimes you're getting something that was recorded in a bedroom or in a garage or in a small project studio. Maybe the room wasn't optimal, maybe the miking wasn't optimal, and we do want to scrub out a little bit of that bleed. Normally, we would just use gates to do this, and we would spend some time setting up gates on our kick and our snare and you know, everything else, toms. A lot of engineers will even go through and scrub out all the audio in between where the toms are hit. I've even seen guys do that in between where all the snare drums are hit. That takes a very long time to do. It's very, very complex and detailed editing work, and you got to be really, really careful. You end up just chopping the absolute heck out of all your drum tracks. It can get very tricky. Drumatom 2 is going to come in and make a job like that much, much, much easier and much, much faster. And it does sound really, really good. Now, at time of filming, it does retail for $299 USD, $300. That is a bit steep, but when you think about what you're getting, such an advanced algorithm, I'm sure it took a ton of work to program this thing. And for somebody who does a lot of professional mix work, I could see it being something that you would use constantly. You know, if you're getting new records in every week, or even for some guys every single day, you know, this might be something that you want to use all the time. So from that aspect, it could be totally worth it. That is ultimately a decision that is up to you guys. But if it seems like it fits your workflow, I think it's the best option out there for this kind of thing. It's certainly the best option I have seen. So 2 thumbs up. Big thank you to the guys at Accusonus. They've provided me with licenses for pretty much all of their plugins, and we've done videos on all of them. I think they're an incredibly cool company. They're doing very, very innovative stuff, and I think for a lot of guys out there, depending on your workflow, it's all stuff that's very, very useful. It's all sits at a bit of a higher price point, but, you know, again, professional tools cost professional money. So in any case, just thank you so much to the guys at Accusonus for hooking me up. It's been a great amount of fun checking out all the plugins. They're very, very cool. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Drumatom and Accusonus. What do you guys think? Is this something you would use in your workflow? What's your current approach to removing bleed from drum mics? Whatever the case may be, definitely let me know in the comments down below. I always love hearing from you guys. If you have not yet subscribed to our channel here at Consordini, that really helps us out. Be sure to click the notification bell to be kept up to date with our new content. And if you dug this video, want to give it a like, a share, that's amazing as well. Regardless, my name is Alex Scott with Consordini.com. Thank you guys again so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, found it informative, and we will see you in the next video.